Welcome students, a happy Shubho Namabarsho to all of you. So we shall start today the first antibiotics group, that is beta-lactam antibiotics. On the left side you will find Professor Sir Alexander Fleming, the discoverer of the penicillin, and which became a healing agent during the Second World War. And the objective of the class, this is a view chapter. You need to read in detail, but not everything is important. I shall just highlight which one is important. So what are the beta-lactam antimicrobials? That means there are 5 groups of beta-lactam antimicrobials. You need to remember that. What is their mechanism of action? Types of penicillin, their uses and adverse drug reactions. Classification of cephalosporin, their examples, uses and adverse drug reactions, and a brief idea about the members of the carbapenem and monobactams, uses and ADRs. So beta-lactam antibiotics, there are 5 drug groups: penicillin, cephalosporin, monobactam, carbapenem and beta-lactamase inhibitors. So all of them have a beta-lactam ring in them. Penicillin can be divided into narrow spectrum penicillin, penicillin is resistant penicillin, that is also called anti-cephalococcal penicillin, and extended spectrum penicillin. So narrow spectrum means number of bacteria it affects. So penicillin narrow spectrum, penicillin is resistant penicillin means some organisms exhibit penicillinase which destroy the penicillin, and narrow spectrum penicillins are not active against them. But the penicillin is resistant penicillins can be active against them because they are resistant to the penicillinase that is expressed by some bacteria like Staphylococci. And extended spectrum penicillins are having their spectrum are far more wider, that they can inhibit some gram-negative bacteria also. Cephalosporin, on the other hand, can be divided into 5 generations. I shall discuss it later. 1st generation to 5th generation. Beta-lactam antibiotic also has carbapenems, monobactam and beta-lactamase inhibitors. Beta-lactamase inhibitors, you should remember that they are not used alone. They are used with other beta-lactams like penicillin and cephalosporins, so that they can be active against the drugs, against the organisms which also produce beta-lactamase, and thus beta-lactamase producing bacteria became active if we combine beta-lactam drug with beta-lactamase inhibitors. And this is the core structure of the 4 beta-lactam antibiotic family. So here you see, this is the penicillin, this is the A ring and B ring. B ring stands for the beta-lactam and A ring is thiazolidine ring. Cephalosporin also has this ring. Monobactam has only B ring. There is no A ring in monobactam. Carbapenem has also beta-lactam ring. So core structure of 4 beta-lactam antibiotic family. The ring marked B in its structure is the beta-lactam ring. Penicillins are susceptible to bacterial metabolism and inactivation by amylase and lactamase at the points shown. So there are 2 enzymes, one is amylase, one is beta-lactamase, and carbapenems have a different stereochemical configuration in the lactam ring, and that apparently imparts resistance to the beta-lactamase. Okay, so beta-lactamase cannot destroy the carbapenem, but beta-lactamase can damage the penicillin cephalosporin mainly. And penicillin, it was the first antibiotic to be used clinically in 1941, and its discovery is an interesting one. It was one of the least antitoxic antibiotic even today, and it was obtained initially from the Penicillium rotatum, but its yield was poor. That's why Penicillium carcinoma is now commonly used, because it has better yield. Now, it was discovered by Alexander Fleming in 1928. He was a professor of bacteriology at St. Mary's Hospital in London. And now we are in holiday mode, though it is not a desired holiday mode, but whatever may be, this is how sometimes holidays are important. And after returning from a summer holiday on September 3, 1928, Fleming began to sort through petri dishes containing colonies of the Staphylococcus bacteria. So, and he found that some unusual thing on one dish. It was dotted with colonies, and it is some mold was growing on that. So the zone immediately around the mold, later identified as a rare strain of Penicillium rotatum, was clear. So there was in a staphylococcal colony, there is a clear zone around a mold growth of mold, and it was identified as a penicillin later, and this is a rare strain of Penicillium notatum, as if the mold was secreted something that what inhibited bacterial growth. So if the holiday was not there, probably it will be unnoticed. As holiday was there, Penicillium notatum, their colony is also increased, and that make them enable to lyse the staphylococcal colony. So Penicillium mold, they express the penicillin which destroyed the staphylococcal colony, and thus after a holiday it was identified as an agent which can destroy the staphylococcal colony. And Fleming found that this mold juice was capable of killing a wide range of harmful bacteria such as streptococci, meningococci, diphtheria, etc. But he could not. He published his finding in the British Journal of Experimental Pathology in June 1928, but the yield was poor. So to cure 1% of people, a huge amount of penicillin was needed, and to make that, a large amount of Penicillium notatum need to be grown, which was not possible on a large scale. It was Howard Florey and Ernst Chain and their colleagues in the Sir William Dunn School of Pathology at Oxford University who turned penicillin from laboratory curiosity into life-saving drug. So Florey and Chain made their yield better, and their work on the purification and chemistry of penicillin in the 1939 during the beginning of the Second World War. And to carry out a program of animal experiments and clinical trials, the team needed to process up to 500 liters a week of mold filtrate. They began growing it in a strange array of culture vessels, and later a customized fermentation vessel was designed for ease of the removing and to save space. A team of penicillin girls was employed at 2 pounds per day per week to inoculate and generally look after the fermentation. In effect, the Oxford laboratory was being turned into a penicillin factory. So after that, and they mainly used Penicillium chrysogenum for this better yield. In 1940, Florey carried out vital experiments showing that penicillin could protect mice against infection from debilitating streptococci. Then in 1941, a 43-year-old policeman, Albert Alexander, became the first recipient of the Oxford penicillin. He has scratched his side of mouth while running roses and had developed a life-threatening infection with huge abscess affecting his eyes, face and lungs. Penicillin was injected, and within days he made a remarkable recovery. But supply of the drug ran out and he died in a few days later. Better dose was followed with other patients though, and soon there were plans to make penicillin available for the British troops on the battlefield. That is the history of the penicillin. Remember the Fleming who isolated it first, but Chain and Florey made it possible so that it can be used in a larger number of patients. So original penicillin was penicillin G, benzyl penicillin, where R is the benzyl, CH2C6H5. Chemistry, penicillin are substituted 6-amino penicillinic acid. A thiazolidine ring is attached to a beta-lactam ring that carries a secondary amino group. So there is A ring is thiazolidine ring and B ring is beta-lactam ring. Substitutions can be attached to this amino group. Structural integrity of the 6-amino penicillinic acid nucleus is essential for the biological activity. And hydrolysis of the beta-lactam ring by bacterial beta-lactamase yields the penicilloic acid, which lacks antibacterial activity. So there are 2 enzymes I have discussed. This is the chemistry. It is a substituted 6-amino penicillinic acid and after the action on the beta-lactamase, there is only penicilloic acid which lacks antibacterial activity. Now there are 2 enzymes, beta-lactam, amylase and beta-lactamase. So this beta-lactam ring is broken by the beta-lactamase enzyme, and this side chain is broken by the amylase enzyme. So amylase enzyme, after breaking down the amylase enzyme, it is the active material or raw material for other penicillin, and this after action of the beta-lactamase enzyme, the remainder part is inactive, that is responsible for the hypersensitivity reaction. So once again, site of action of penicillin is 1, and number 2, site of action of this is the amylase enzyme. After the action of the amylase, we have this active component, that is the 6-amino penicillinic acid. After the action of this active material, after action of the penicillin, we have the penicilloic acid, which is responsible mainly for the hypersensitivity reaction, but it is inactive clinically. So remember, amidase derives the 6-amino penicillinic acid, penicillinase derives the penicilloic acid. So these are the different substitutes of the penicillin: penicillin G, V, ampicillin, amoxicillin, methicillin, and all have beta-lactam. So family tree of beta-lactam antibiotics: clavulanic acid, penicillin, carbapenems. These are the monobactams, and these are the cephalosporins. Penicillin was discovered in 1940, actually by Chen and Flore. After that it came into use. So remember, penicillin was the first antibiotic to be discovered in 1929, but sulfonamide was the first antibiotic which came into clinical use in 1935 by Domack, and penicillin used in patients during the Second World War, that is in 1940, 1941, etc. After that, cephalosporin was discovered in 1948. After that, there was carbapenem in 1976, and clavulanic acid and also monobactam were followed quickly. Beta-lactam ring, it is broken by the penicillinase and by the gastric acid. That's why conventional penicillins are not given orally. Resultant product is penicilloic acid. It has no antibacterial activity but acts as a major antigenic determinant, acts as hapten. Hypersensitivity reaction is the most important adverse effect of the penicillin. So penicillins destroy the cell wall which we lack. That's why overall adverse effect is less, but it can cause some hypersensitivity reaction that is due to penicilloic acid moiety, which is derived after penicillin is broken down by the beta-lactamase enzyme. So this is the classification of the penicillin. Narrow spectrum: penicillin G, penicillin V. Penicillin is resistant penicillin, anti-staphylococcus, dicloxacillin, nafcillin. So this is the also called anti-staphylococcal penicillin because staphylococci commonly are resistant to the penicillin because they have the enzyme penicillinase which destroys the penicillin soon after the entry of the penicillin into the microorganisms, into staphylococci. So penicillin resistant penicillin was discovered so that they retain their activity even after entry into the staphylococci. So such examples are dicloxacillin, nafcillin, flucloxacillin. External penicillins, they can penetrate into the gram-negative bacteria also. So amoxicillin, ampicillin, piperacillin, ticarcillin, some of them are combined with the beta-lactamase enzyme in beta-lactamase inhibitor to increase their action on the gram-negative. So beta-lactamase inhibitors are clavulanic acid, sulbactam, tazobactam. So remember, penicillins are mainly three varieties: narrow spectrum, penicillin-resistant penicillin, and extended spectrum penicillin. And remember one or two examples of each group. Penicillin units and formulation. The activity of the penicillin G was originally defined as units, and you can remember in many ways. Actually, 1 million unit of penicillin is 0.6 gram, or 1600 units make 1 mg. Semi-synthetic penicillins are prescribed by weight rather than units. So remember this. So 1 million unit of penicillin is 0.6 gram of penicillin. But this is the natural penicillin. But there are some semi-synthetic penicillin like amoxicillin, ampicillin. They are prescribed in weight. And most penicillins are dispensed as the sodium or Russian salt of the free acid, and protein salts and benzothine salts of the penicillin G provide repository forms. So normally penicillins need to be given quite frequently because they act on the principles of T by MIC. That means the time above which it remains above the MIC, more consistent is their action because they are short acting. But protein penicillin and benzothine penicillin are two forms of repository penicillin which can be given at a larger interval. That means they can be given less frequently. And in dry crystalline form, crystalline penicillin salts are stable for years up to 4 degrees Celsius, but solutions lose their activity rapidly. Example: 24 hours after 24 hours at 20 degrees Celsius, it loses their activity. That's why penicillins, the injectable penicillins, are available in dry powder form. Before giving the injection, we make them solution by dissolving it in the water, and we need to inject them rapidly to prevent their loss of activity. So they must be prepared fresh for administration, and so that they can be active just after making it dissolved into the water. Now, mechanism of action. So it has a complex mechanism of action. Before we study the mechanism of action, I want to show you a video where you can have to you can understand what are the causes of the cell wall development in gram-positive and gram-negatives, and how different cell wall synthesis inhibitors act. So if you recapitulate from the first class, cell wall synthesis inhibitors there are 5 drugs. Penicillin, cephalosporin is one. Penicillin, cephalosporin. Then we have vancomycin. Then we have cycloserine, and then we have vasopressin. So these are the commonly used cell wall synthesis inhibitors. Now how they act. So now look at the video.
Structurally, most bacteria consist of a cell membrane surrounded by a cell wall, and for some bacteria, an additional outer layer. Internal to the cell membrane is the cytoplasm, which contains ribosomes, a nuclear region, and in some cases, granules and/or vesicles. Depending on the bacterial species, a number of different external structures may be found, such as a capsule, flagella, and pili. In gram-negative bacteria, the gap between the cell membrane and the cell wall is known as the periplasmic space. Most gram-positive bacteria do not possess a periplasmic space, but have only periplasm, where metabolic digestion occurs and new cell peptidoglycan is attached. Peptidoglycan, the most important component of the cell wall, is a polymer made of N-acetylmuramic acid, alternating with
components are
N-acetylglucosamine, which are cross-linked by chains of 4 amino acids.
and
The
there
function of the bacterial cell
multiple
wall
layers are
is to maintain the
linked by a
characteristic
chain.
shape of the
That is
organism
called
and to prevent the bacterium from bursting
peptide
when
chain.
fluid flows into the organism by osmosis. Synthesis of the peptidoglycan and ultimately the bacterial cell wall occurs in a number of stages. One of the first stages is the addition of 5 amino acids to
So this is
N-acetylmuramic
happening in the
acid.
cytoplasm. N-acetylglucosamine is the primary molecule, and after that there is one enzyme that is converting N-acetylmuramic acid glucosamine to N-acetylmuramic acid, and N-acetylmuramic acid is then attached with 5 pentapeptide structure, and they are then.
Once in the periplasm, the peptidoglycan.
So what we learned that with N-acetylglucosamine and N-acetylmuramic acid, they combined in the cytoplasm. N-acetylglucosamine is the initial molecule which is converted into N-acetylmuramic acid by one enzyme that is called MUR-A, and with this N-acetylmuramic acid there is a attachment of 5-membered amino acid, that is pentapeptide structure, and there is also combination role of the UDP here. So UDP N-acetylmuramic acid and UDP N-acetylglucosamine, they are with this pentapeptide structure, they are transferred from the cytoplasm into the across the cell membrane, and outside they are making the cell wall, and this transfer of their N-acetylmuramic acid and N-acetylglucosamine from the cytoplasm to outside the cell membrane is carried out by one protein that is called bactroprenol. And you need to learn that because there is one drug which prevents this transfer of this N-acetylmuramic acid and N-acetylglucosamine moiety from cytoplasm into the cell membrane, outside the cell membrane.
Glycan precursors bind to cell wall acceptors and undergo extensive cross-linking. 2 major enzymes are involved in cross-linking: transpeptidase and D-alanine carboxypeptidase. These enzymes are also known as penicillin-binding proteins because of their ability to bind to penicillins and
This is the action of the transpeptidase enzyme. So transpeptidase, they cleave the terminal amino acid of the pentapeptide structure. So there are 5 membered amino acid, and the terminal amino acid is alanine, and they cleave this last alanine residue, this transpeptide enzyme, and this is also called penicillin binding protein, because penicillin has a structural similarity with this penicillin binding protein. Penicillin binds with this penicillin binding protein, and they prevent this transpeptide reaction.
Sporins. Eventually, several layers of peptidoglycan are formed, all of which are cross-linked to create the cell wall. Gram-positive bacteria may have more layers than gram-negative bacteria, and thus have a much thicker cell wall.
So the
beta-lactam antibiotics include all penicillins and cephalosporins that contain a chemical structure called a beta-lactam ring. This structure is capable of binding to the enzymes that cross-link peptidoglycans. Beta-lactams interfere with cross-linking by binding to transpeptidase and dealanine carboxypeptidase enzymes, thus preventing bacterial cell wall synthesis.
That's why there is no cross.
By inhibiting cell wall synthesis, the bacterial cell is damaged. Gram-positive bacteria have a high internal osmotic pressure. Without a normal rigid cell wall, these cells burst when subjected to the low osmotic pressure of their surrounding environment. As well, the antibiotic penicillin binding protein complex stimulates the release of autolysins that are capable of digesting the existing cell wall. Beta-lactam antibiotics are therefore considered bactericidal agents.
Now go back to the slides. So this is the action of the beta-lactamase enzyme, beta-lactam drugs. So what does they do? They prevent the transpeptidation reaction, which is responsible for making the cell wall layers thick by cross-linking between 2 layers of the peptidoglycan, which is composed mainly of the N-acetyl monomic acid and N-acetyl glucosamine. So most penicillin bacterial by interfering with the transpeptidation reaction of bacterial cell wall synthesis. The cell wall is composed of a complex cross-linked polymer of polysaccharides and polypeptides called as peptidoglycans. So cell wall, mainly for the gram-positive, there is a complex cross-linked polymer of polysaccharide and polypeptides, and polysaccharide contains alternating amino sugars, N-acetyl glucosamine and N-acetyl monomic acid. N-acetyl glucosamine is the primary molecule, and there is one enzyme which is called MUR-A, which converts N-acetyl glucosamine into N-acetyl monomic acid. A 5 amino acid peptide is now linked to the N-acetyl monomic acid sugar. This peptide terminates into D-alanine. So the 4th and 5th amino acid of this peptide structure is alanine. Both have D-alanine and D-alanine. And penicillin binding protein, which is an enzyme, removes the terminal alanine in a process, forming a cross-link with the nearby peptide. So there are 2 enzymes. One is called transglycosylase enzyme. Transglycosylase enzyme is actually makes the attachment of the N-acetyl monomic acid and N-acetyl glucosamine within a layer, and transpeptidase enzyme, they form bond between the layers. So within the layers, N-acetyl monomic acid and N-acetyl glucosamine, they are linked by transglycosylase enzyme, and transpeptidase enzyme, they make these by this 5-membered amino acid structure, they make the attachment between 2 layers, and thus multiple layers can be combined to form a thick cell wall. But this penicillin binding protein, or the transpeptidase enzyme, actually is responsible for making the cell wall thick by combining between layers of the penicillin of the layer of the peptidoglycan. The beta-lactam antibiotic structure analogs of the natural DLR substrate covalently bind to the active site of the penicillin binding protein. So now beta-lactam antibiotics, they are structure analog of the 5-membered amino acid structures, D-alanine, D-alanine, and they thus covalently bind to the active site of the transpeptidase enzyme, or that is also called penicillin binding protein. Thus, this inhibits the transpeptidation reaction. So as beta-lactam antibiotics occupy the uh, active site of the transpeptidase enzyme. So transpeptidation reaction cannot happen. Thus, peptidoglycan layers cannot be combined, cannot be cross-linked, and the cell dies. There is damage in the cell wall formation. So penicillin cephalosporin kills the bacterial cell only when they are actively growing and synthesizing cell wall. So cell wall synthesis inhibition means cell is lysed, and as cell is lysed, they are called bactericidal, and as the principle of the bactericidal drugs, they are active when bacteria is rapidly proliferating or actively growing. So this is the action of the beta-lactam group of drugs. So this is the different gram-positive and difference of the structure of the gram-positive and gram-negative bacterial cell wall. So within the gram-positive, there are peptidoglycan layers. Beta-lactam is not so much active, but some like staphylococcus exhibit the beta-lactam, and there is a cis plasma membrane and penicillin binding protein resides here, which form the cross-link between these two different layers of the peptidoglycan. So remember, within this layer, this link is formed by the transglycosylase enzyme. Between the layer, this cross-link is formed by the transpeptidase enzyme, and penicillin inhibits this transpeptidation reaction by combining with this by binding with this transpeptidase enzyme. But in the gram-negative, this structure is little bit more difficult. So there, the peptidoglycan layer is thin, but there is then one outer membrane and there is a plasma membrane, and within the outer membrane there is a protein channel, and there is a lipopolysaccharide, and there is in the periplasmic stage there is beta-lactamase, and most of the gram-negative express this beta-lactamase enzyme. That's why beta-lactam, though they get entered, they are rapidly destroyed, and also due to this thick outer membrane, beta-lactam entry is poor unless there is a protein channel. So some drug organisms like Pseudomonas, they do not have the protein channels. That's why beta-lactams are not effective against them. Okay. So this is different. That's why normally, as there is due to this outer membrane protein and due to expression of the beta-lactamase enzyme periplasmically, there is less activity of the penicillin on the gram-negative bacteria. This can come as external. Next, so we have discussed it. N-acetylglucosamine, N-acetylmonomic acid. There is the enzyme is transpeptidase, which cleaves the terminal alanine of the 5-membered amino acid structure. And this is the glucosyl transferase, which is combining between this layer, glucosyl transferase or transglycosylase. The enzyme can be, this is the enzyme which is making the cross link within the layer, and transpeptidase enzyme making the cross link between the layers. So beta-lactamase enzyme inhibit the transpeptidase. What is the effect? There is damage of the cross-linking, there is weakening of the cell wall, swelling of the cell due to endosmosis, and there is bacterial membrane burst, and there is bacterial lysis. Also, there is activation of the autolyzing enzyme, and this is more lethal during active depletion. So, if question comes, what is the mechanism of action of beta-lactam drugs? You have to write in detail about the peptidoglycan layers, formation of the peptidoglycan by the N-acetylglucosamine and monomic acid. They are transferred from the cytoplasm to outside the cell membrane by bactroprenal moiety, and after this there is formation of the cross-link between the layers by transpeptidase enzyme, and also within the layers by the transglycosylase enzyme, and after that this transpeptidase enzyme is actually cleaving the terminal D-alanine residue of the amino acid structure, and there is cross-link formation, and penicillin binds with the transpeptidase enzyme and prevents the cross-link formation as they inhibit the transpeptidation reaction. So there is no cross-link formation between the layers, and ultimately cell wall is damaged, and there is weakening of the cell wall and swelling of the cell, which causes the bacterial lysis. So this is the pictorial expression of the structure of the beta-lactamase enzyme. So look here, there are 5-membered amino acids, but after the action of the cross-link by the transpeptidase enzyme, there is only 4 amino acids is remaining because terminal D-alanine has been clipped. Beta-lactam antibiotics inhibit this cross-link formation. That means 5-membered amino acid structure remain as such. So there is no cleaving of the terminal alanine residue by the transpeptidation reaction. Now, penicillin binding proteins can be of 3 types. PVP1 involved in the peptidoglycan synthesis, PBB2 is carboxypeptidase and PBB3 is endopeptidase. So PBB2 it hydrolyzes terminal D-alanine residue present on the adjacent pentapeptide chain to promote further cross-linking, and PBB3 is endopeptidase inhibition leads to filamentation where cell cannot separate from one another during cell division. So PBB2 is more important, which is producing the cross-link. So vector cytoactivity of penicillin is more against the gram-positive. In gram-positive, thick layer of peptidoglycans and teichoic acid surrounds the membrane, and peptidoglycan layer is easily accessible to beta-lactam antibiotics. In gram-negative, two membranes are present: the cytoplasmic membrane and outer membrane, and a thin layer of peptidoglycan is present. And already as thin peptidoglycan layer is thin, so inhibition of the peptidoglycan formation and the cross-link inhibition of the cross-link formation will not help much. That's why, and also there is difficulty of the beta-lactam drug. Sometimes there is difficulty in entrance into the gram-negative because of the outer membrane protein and lack of protein channels, and also gram-negative express the beta-lactamase enzyme, which rapidly destroys the beta-lactam drugs after entry. So that this is the reason for which beta-lactam drugs are not so much effective against the gram-negative bacteria. So penicillins which are hydrophilic in nature, amoxicillin, ampicillin, can diffuse through the protein channels and show activity against the gram-negative, as for those Pseudomonas lacks the proteins, due to which even ampicillin and amoxicillin cannot act against them. And amyloglycoside addition is synergistic. So beta-lactam is damaging cell wall, and that's why amyloglycoside gets better penetration, and amyloglycoside also damaging the cell membrane, so their action is synergistic. Now, what are the actions of the other beta cell wall synthesis inhibitors? So I have mentioned few steps. One is formation of the N-acetyl glucosamine, formation of the N-acetyl monoamic acid from N-acetyl glucosamine. So NAG to NAM conversion is done by the MUR-A enzyme, and this MUR-A enzyme is inhibited by one drug called phosphomycin. The phosphomycin inhibits the formation of the N-acetyl monoamic acid from N-acetyl glucosamine. So this phosphomycin also has some cell wall inhibitory effect. That means they block the initial pathway of the peptide-glycan synthesis. So as acetyl monoamic acid is not formed, there is no question of binding of the pentapeptide amino acid structure, and there is no chance of cross-link formation. So this is the one drug phosphomycin, which inhibits this MUR-A enzyme and prevents the formation of the N-acetyl monoamic acid. Next is bactropenol, the protein which carries the N-acetyl acid and N-acetyl monoamic acid and N-acetyl glucosamine from cytoplasm to outside cell membrane. That is bactropenol is inhibited by bacitracin. So bacitracin inhibits the transport of the peptide-glycan structure from the cytoplasm to the cell membrane, but they inhibit the bactropenol. Next, so I mentioned that D-alanine is the fourth and fifth amino acid structure in the pentapeptide sequence. So D-alanine, there is one ligase enzyme which is attaching the fifth D-alanine to fourth D-alanine. So fourth D-alanine and fifth D-alanine binding is done by one ligase, D-LR ligase, and this D-LR ligase is inhibited by vancomycin. And also the fourth alanine is commonly initially it was L-alanine, and L-alanine is converted to D-alanine. So fourth amino acid is L-alanine. L-alanine is converted to D-alanine, and this conversion is done by one enzyme called racemase, and this racemase enzyme is blocked by cycloserine. So this cycloserine and vancomycin, they prevent the formation of the pentapeptide ring amino acid structure. So cycloserine inhibits the formation of the fourth L-alanine to D-alanine conversion, and fourth alanine to fifth alanine combination, that is the D-alanine ligase. This enzyme is blocked by vancomycin. So these are the different drugs: phosphomycin, bacitracin. Phosphomycin inhibits the N-acetyl monoamic acid synthesis. Bacitracin inhibits bactropenol mediated transport of peptide-glycan structure from the cytoplasm to the outside cell membrane. Racemase enzyme is blocked by cycloserine, which converts the fourth amino acids, L-alanine to D-alanine conversion, and vancomycin prevents the DLL ligase, which is making the attachment of fourth and fifth amino acid structure in the pentapeptide sequence. So remember this different site of action of the different beta-lactam cell wall inhibitor and beta-lactam drugs, penicillin, cephalosporin, carbapenems, they block the transpeptidase enzyme. So if as we discussed the mechanism of action, we have to know the how they become resistant. So penicillin resistance is very common, and it is due to one of the four general mechanisms. So we have discussed the general mechanism in the general principle of the antibiotics. So here also penicillins can become resistant due to one of those four mechanisms. Inactivation of the antibiotic by beta-lactamase. So beta-lactamase is produced by the gram negatives as well as Staphylococcus. So the antibiotic which is producing the organism which is having the beta-lactamase, they are rapidly destroying the beta-lactam drugs. That's why they are become resistant. Modification of the target penicillin binding protein. So if the target site is mutated, then penicillin cannot bind properly to the PEP. PEP here is the penicillin binding protein or transpeptidase enzyme. So if transpeptidase enzyme is defective, then penicillin cannot bind and they cannot inhibit the transpeptidase reaction, so they cannot inhibit the cell wall synthesis. Next is impaired penetration of the drug due to target of the drug to target PEP. So when there is impaired penetration of the drug, for example in gram-negative bacteria, there is impaired penetration due to presence of the outer membrane protein, outer cell membrane, and also if there is lack of original in Pseudomonas, they cannot penetrate well, and also if it is effluxed, certain after entry, there some efflux protein can be expressed by some bacteria, which is making the drug resistant. So this is the four mechanisms: inactivation of the antibiotic beta-lactamase, modification of the target protein penicillin binding protein, impaired penetration of the drug to target penicillin binding protein, and efflux. So if you remember the four common mechanisms of the bacterial resistance, you can write the penicillin resistance as well. So, inactivation of antibiotic beta-lactamase is the primary mechanism, most common mechanism of resistance. And beta-lactamase produced by the Staph aureus, Haemophilus, E. coli have relatively narrow substrate specificity, effective on penicillin and ineffective on the cephalosporin. So some beta-lactamase are narrow spectrum, some beta-lactamase are wide spectrum. Narrow spectrum beta-lactamase means they are active and they are destroying the penicillin only, but they cannot inhibit the cephalosporin. But beta-lactamase produced by the Pseudomonas aeruginosa Enterobacter species hydrolyze both cephalosporin and penicillin. So beta-lactamase produced by the Pseudomonas and Enterobacter, they are wide spectrum because they degrade the penicillin and cephalosporin both. But if penicillin is by beta-lactamase produced by the Staph aureus, E. coli, Haemophilus, they mainly degrade the penicillin. And carbapenems are highly resistant to hydrolysis by beta-lactamase, but they are hydrolyzed by metallo-beta-lactamase. So carbapenems, they are normally not degraded by the beta-lactamase, but there is special beta-lactamase that is called metallo-beta-lactamase, which is discovered first in the New Delhi, and they can degrade the carbapenems as well. Next is modification of target penicillin binding protein. So alteration in the target penicillin binding protein is responsible for the methicillin resistance in Staphylococcus. So in Staphylococcus, Staphylococcus is a notorious organism. It can produce resistance to many drugs, including penicillin. They express beta-lactamase as well as there is impaired binding because there is alteration in the target PEP is responsible for the methicillin resistance in Staphylococcus and penicillin resistance in pneumococci and enterococcus. So methicillin was first thought to be a drug to be used in the anti-staphylococcal penicillin because methicillin can degrade the methicillin was resistant to penicillinase enzyme, but it was found that some Staphylococcus aureus also are resistant to methicillin as well. So that's why the reason was found that methicillin cannot bind to this altered protein, penicillin binding protein expressed by some Staphylococcus. So Staphylococcus can have altered penicillin binding protein as well as they can and beta-lactamase enzyme. That's why even if anti-staphylococcal penicillin or penicillin is used, they cannot be killed satisfactorily by the beta-lactamase enzyme because of this alteration of the target PEP. They are resistant organisms produce PEPs that have low affinity for binding beta-lactam antibiotics, and consequently they are not inhibited by therapeutic drug concentration. Impaired penetration of the drug due to target PEP. Resistance due to impaired penetration of the antibiotic to target PEPs occurs only in the gram-negative species because of the outer cell wall membrane, and beta-lactam antibiotics cross the outer membrane and enter gram-negative organisms via outer membrane protein channels. If protein channels is defective, they cannot bind. So absence of the proper channel or down regulation of its production greatly reduce the drug entry into the cell. So remember this staphylococci, they can have the both mechanisms, penicillinase production of the penicillinase as well as production of the altered penicillin binding protein, and pseudomonas have another mechanism, that is alteration of the or less expression of the protein channel so that it cannot penicillin cannot enter. And also efflux, gram-negative organism also may produce an efflux form which consists of cytoplasmic and periplasmic protein components that efficiently transport some beta-lactam antibiotics from the periplasm back across into the outer membrane. So the drugs remain inactive. They are made to exit even before their action. So penicillins, what are their pharmacokinetics? Ampicillin and amoxicillin are the acid stable and well absorbed drugs that are suitable for the oral dose. Absorption of most penicillins is impaired by the food and should be administered at least 1 to 2 hours before and after a meal. After parenteral administration, absorption is complete and rapid. And remember, absorption is impaired by the food, should be administered at least 1 to 2 hours before or after a meal. Intravenous administration is preferred to the intravascular route because there is irritation and local pain after the intramuscular injection. And I have discussed that benzethine and procaine penicillin are the formulated to delay absorption, resulting in prolonged blood and tissue concentration, equally distributed in the body and also excreted in the sputum and milk. Though CNS penetration is poor, but in presence of meningitis, when there is inflammation, they can able to penetrate this in sufficient concentration to kill susceptible strains of the pneumococci and meningococci. So remember, some of the penicillin like amoxicillin and ampicillin can be given orally, but they need to be given in empty stomach relatively. So as their absorption is impaired by the food, so 1 hour before or 2 hours after a meal is the ideal at time. So of the giving amoxicillin or ampicillin. After parenteral admission, absorption is complete and rapid. So far, note down my few questions of the penicillin. What was the first penicillium strain which was utilized for the penicillin production? Number 2, what are the